Hello and welcome to the Euranet Plus Summit, a debate with Europe's leading radio network for EU news. Turbulent times continues with Russia's war against Ukraine that already entered its fifth year, and we see no end of tensions in the Middle East. These issues are having significant impact on Europe, affecting everything from our security to economy, but most importantly today, our security. This is why we are here today to discuss these issues with Andrius Kubilius, European Commissioner for Defense and Space. Sveiki.
Sveiki, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Aušra Jurgauskaitė. Just like Commissioner, I come from Lithuania. I asked you to give a number from 1 to 10. How safe is Europe? How prepared are we to defend ourselves? And you are giving no number, you are not saying it. Would you?
Well, I think it's quite difficult, to evaluate in the numbers. We are facing, really challenging situation, both with possibility of Russian aggression, second with Americans clearly declaring that they will start to change their position in Europe, that they will staying in NATO, they will move more and more of their resources towards Indo-Pacific, and then the war in Iran is changing the situation in the, let's say, in the Western market of weapons. American weapons will not be available, both for Europe and for Ukraine, for quite a long period of time, and that's what creates some kind of challenging situation.
Talking about US President Donald Trump has long been expressing his disappointment with NATO, even threatening to probably leave the alliance. You said last week that a European army could help fix NATO. Is this still just an idea, or you are actually moving forward to it, this European army?
Well, a European army is just one of not most important things which we need to discuss. But we need seriously to take into account, and rational to take into account, not only what President Trump is speaking sometimes emotionally, but what American authorities are writing down in their new national defense strategy, what, for example, their officials, including Undersecretary in War Department Andrius Kubilius, was speaking here in Brussels. I met him in Washington, D.C. recently. One, they are speaking about what they call the new concept of NATO, so-called NATO 3.0. That NATO needs to move into new structural, let's say so, situation where Europeans will need to take the primary leading role in taking care about European defense. In European defense, Americans will stay with a secondary role because Americans will need to move more and more of their resources, which now they have on the European continent, towards Indo-Pacific or Western Hemisphere. Now, among those resources which they have on the European continent, there are, first of all, so-called strategic enablers, let's say material resources, which we need to replace. And second, they have around 8,000 or 100 American troops on the European continent, which are playing very important backbone role. So if Americans will start to remove those troops from the European continent, then we need to look also how to replace them. And that is where it comes to this, let's say, idea or one of the possible solutions that we need to create similar type of military force, European military force, which could play a similar role. And that role is to be something like a rapid reaction force.
But the condition is if US moves away the troops from Europe, then we can talk about European army, as I understood.
That we can call that European army, we can call that European rapid reaction force, but what we need to understand is that this is not a replacement of national European armies. It's a replacement of American troops, which are now located in the European continent.
And Mart from Kuku Radio in Estonia has a question about how our military industry and the situation in the Middle East are affecting our support for Ukraine. Mart, the floor is yours.
Yeah, my question is, you already pointed out that due to the war in Iran, US weapons are not arriving to Ukraine. Also, we need good production progress, as you just said, but this is all a long-term project and long-term solutions. So my question is, what can we do now? What is the short-term solution for, let's say, weapons to Ukraine if we can't rely on the United States at the moment?
That will be a challenge, how really we can keep Ukrainian air defense in a good shape. Now, that is why we need really to ramp up also different production of missiles in Europe, and also to support missile production in Ukraine. It appears that Ukrainians are much more able to quickly search production of different weapons. It's not anymore no surprise, but I can tell you just few numbers. What we need to see as a bigger issue, that at the moment, despite all our investments into defense, Russia is outproducing us quite heavily. And that really is a bad tendency. For example, in production of cruise missiles, Russia is producing per year around 1,200 missiles. We in European Union were able to produce around 300. Ukrainians last year started to produce cruise missiles, so-called Flamingo. This year they will produce around 700. Russians are producing per year around 1,000 ballistic missiles, which were used to attack Ukraine. We are not producing at all in Europe. Ukrainians are starting to produce this year their own ballistic missiles. So this is, our support to Ukraine, our support to Ukrainian industry, maybe can be one of those directions which can also allow us to help Ukraine much more effectively in order really for Ukraine to be able to defend itself.
Speaking about Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky announced discussions over a new joint defense system with European Union members and non-EU members like Ukraine, Norway, UK or Turkey.
I see a lot of rationality in what President Zelensky was and is speaking about. And I myself, I am repeating a few points on that topic. First of all, we need to understand, if Putin will decide to start an aggression against NATO or EU member states somewhere in the neighborhood of Russia, as our military intelligence always is warning us, then we shall face a Russian battle-tested army, which is able to use millions of drones. Ukrainians are predicting that this year Russians will be able to use around 7 or 8 million drones. So Russian army is today much stronger than it was back in 2022. And on our side, among members of EU or members of NATO, we do not have such a battle-tested experience. Only Ukrainians have. So from that point of view, definitely for us to look into possibilities, how to integrate both battle-tested Ukrainian industrial capabilities and military capabilities, that would be very strong, very big added value in the development of our European defense capabilities. How to do that? This is what we are starting to discuss, because definitely we need to look how to create some kind of this, broader system of defense, which would be broader than European Union, and also which would allow us to overcome such problem like, that some countries are, for time being, do not agree to have Ukraine as member of NATO. That is why idea which is called European Defense Union, and that tasks to develop this idea of genuine European Defense Union is even written into my so-called mission letter. That idea is what we are working on. It will demand maybe, perhaps, we shall of course discuss with the lawyers, to have a new additional intergovernmental treaty, which would allow us to establish some kind of this network of different member states, united for common defense, having, as a leadership, what we call European Security Council, being able to make decisions on majority voting principle, not being arrested by anybody who wants to veto everything. And then perhaps also such kind of treaty could have, clear provisions also about possibility of creation of European army, what we were talking before. So this idea of European Defense Union, where among EU member states or next to EU member states, we could have also United Kingdom, Norway, Ukraine, maybe some other countries, that's what I see as very important perspective.
We have a last question from Florian at Radio Romania. He is interested in the fact that you are the very first defense commissioner. Florian, the floor is yours.
The portfolio of Defense Commissioner is a new addition to the Commission's portfolios based on the history of the European Union. What are the greatest challenges you face in your relations and cooperation with the Defense Minister of EU countries and with the Chiefs of Staff of the National Armed Forces? And how do you go about this?
Well, first of all, we need to understand why this position was created. Because we are facing, as we understand, all of us were facing big challenges, in security. We can call it security crisis. And here, again, this formula of Jean Monnet is very much, valuable. Because Jean Monnet, back in 1957, when the Rome Treaty was signed, he said, well, a European community will be created during the crisis, and what will be created during the crisis, that will be community.
But what are the challenges?
Challenges are really to be commissioner during the crisis, which means that, a lot of things need to be changed. And that is why, we have very intensive dialogue with member states, with the ministers. Till now, as I said, some kind of historic legacy that only member states themselves, only defense ministers are taking care about defense of their country. In my view, that is sometimes not enough. We need to have much more cooperative approach. It means that we need to be able to coordinate on EU level much more of defense issues, starting from industry, starting from production, but also looking into how to respond, for example, into those challenges like Americans starting to plan to leave European continent and so on and so on. So plenty of challenges, but that makes life, more interesting.
Thank you very much for coming here, European Commissioner for Defense and Space, Andrius Kubilius. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us, and thank all the watchers. See you next time.